All right, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Agile Nova. Today we have guest Chris Sims. Chris is a certified Scrum trainer, and the topic for today is your stories are too big. I think that's still relevant today, Chris, right?
Absolutely. AI, no AI, your
Yes.
stories are still probably too big.
So, so yeah, thank you for making the time to join and present this topic. And I will pass it on to you to just mm, give it a little bit of your background, and then I know you want to run this as a workshop, so we'll jump right into it.
Yay. Well, thanks to you all for coming out, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with you and kind of exploring this topic. Um, yeah, I'm Chris Sims. My company is Agile Learning Labs, and I guess my claim to fame might be I wrote a couple of the best-selling books on Scrum way back in the day. So, but if you want to know more about me, agilelearninglabs.com. You probably learn more than you want to know. So yeah, I'm gonna wow. There we go. All right, I am going to dive right in, and I got a little bit of slide stuff to share. Oh, I should see. I should have started that. No, that's not what I want to do. All right, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I am the great and all-powerful Oz. Here we go. I want to do a little fancier share. Remember, kids, always set up your technology ahead of time so that way people won't see you sweat. Okay, and actually, one more thing. Uh, that's not. Ah. Oh my goodness. No, I swear I have done this before. I swear I've done this before. Okay, there we go. We're getting there. Uh, almost. All right, good enough. All right, so yeah, your stories are too big. And uh, so now that I got all the technology working, um, real quick, why does it matter? So I recognize a couple of you here, and so I know there are like some seasoned practitioners here in the space. And so why not just have great big user stories? What's the problem? So feel free to come off mute or type in the chat. Like
Delays.
overwhelming. Ooh, tell me more about overwhelming.
Well, it's the story I'm working on. It's so big. I don't know where to start. What needs to be done first? There's so many moving parts. Maybe I'll prep prod first before I start doing my development. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's kind of like, where do I start? And then I know sometimes when I've done that, I'll just like pick somewhere to start, and I can sometimes spend a lot of time going down some tangent that at the moment seems like a really important thing, and then later it's like, oh, that's actually one of the least important parts of this whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me more about the longer feedback loops. Why is that bad?
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know, right? So by the time we build something and show the stakeholders or the product folks what we build, we might be going a different direction than was intended, and that will cause delays and frustrations and just a lot of demoralized team members.
Yeah, absolutely, right? One of the key things about Scrum is we have these short cycles, right? These days, most of the teams I'm working with are doing 1 week sprints. There's still a lot of teams doing 2 week sprints. I suppose that's fine. But yeah, we get stuff in front of our stakeholders frequently because if we're doing complex work, um, there's going to be a lot of times that we think we understand what they need and we're wrong, right? There's also going to be a lot of times where we perfectly understood what they asked for and we built exactly that. And it's not until they see it that they have that aha moment of like, oh, wait, actually, that's not going to work. Yeah, actually, we need something different, right? How many of you have had that experience, built them exactly what they asked for, and then they're like, oh, wait, actually, no, we need, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, bigger stories means longer time before we get that critical feedback. And so we can spend a lot longer building essentially the wrong thing. And then yeah, I see that yeah, things take longer, they drag on. So yeah, so the smaller the stories can be, at least the ones at the top of our backlog, the ones we're, bringing into a sprint and starting to work on. In general, the better everything goes, right? With big stories, oh gosh, it's kind of hard to make a commitment because there's a lot of surprise and unknown hidden in there. And then even if we do make a commitment, right? Like, oh, we got surprised. There was something about it we didn't expect, and now we can't finish it this sprint, and it's going to roll over and on, right? So the smaller they are, kind of the better everything goes, right? It's easier to make a plan. We're more likely to succeed. The very act of breaking something big into smaller things parcels out the unknown, right? Manages risk. Um, and it's kind of a design activity, right? Just figuring out how to break things down, we start to think about like, oh, how are we going to build it? So, all right. So some motivation. So all of the techniques I'm going to share assume that you've written the overview of your story in this format. And those of us who've been around, we know you don't have to write everything this way. But I would say that any well-formed story, any well-formed backlog item could be written this way because all this is doing is forcing you to identify the three vital pieces of context, right? Who are we doing this for? What is it we should produce? Why does it matter? And, any well-formed request is going to have those three pieces of detail. So, um, while you don't necessarily have to write all your stories this way, you could. And in fact, if you're having trouble splitting a story smaller, a great first step is to write the overview statement this way, because you might discover, oh, wait a minute, we're not really clear on who we're doing this for or why we're doing it. And so, like, circling back and getting that figured out first, probably pretty important. So, given that, I'm going to share 4 techniques that, in my experience, I found if you are good with these 4 techniques, you will never find a real world user story that you can't break into smaller things that are still stories. And when I say they're still stories, I mean that they still have a stakeholder, someone outside of the team who cares about it and can give us meaningful feedback with regards to the value that we've created. And they have some value that will be created when we complete it, right? As opposed to sometimes I see, product people or stakeholders who are like, oh, we need this thing and it can't possibly be smaller. And the technologists, right, are like, oh, no worries, we can break it down into technical stories, right? We end up with a story about the database and a story about this unit of the business logic. And the thing is, those technical stories generally aren't really stories because we got to do a whole bunch of them before we can get something meaningful in front of a stakeholder to close that feedback loop. So all of the techniques that I'm going to share with you will leave you with something that you can put in front of a stakeholder and get meaningful feedback from them. And I really have never found a story we couldn't split smaller. I mean, theoretically, there should be a bottom, right? Eventually, we should get down to molecules and atoms and quarks, and I think there's something smaller than that now, but I can't remember what it is. But as a practical matter, every time I've sat down with somebody or a group at a workshop where they were kind of intrigued by this, and we're like, yeah, okay, let's try to find the smallest story. We've always given up. We've always gotten bored and been like, oh, okay, yeah, we can go infinitesimally small and still have something that's legitimately a story. There are more than these 4 techniques out in the world. And I encourage you, right? The more techniques you learn, right? The more tools you have in your toolbox, the better off you will be. But I teach these four because I have found them to be a sufficient set, right? It won't be the case that every technique applies to every story, but it does seem to be at least one of these techniques will apply to any given story that you find. So I'm going to start out kind of from the simplest, most obvious, and then work my way into the ones that are more subtle. So the first one, conjunctions and connector words. And with this technique, we are making progress literally just by looking at the words that we've chosen to describe the story and finding ways to break it smaller just by kind of parsing those words. So let me give an example. Now, all of the examples I'm going to share and all the ones we'll work with today will be for a tropical destination resort, right? It'll be like we're going to build and operate a tropical destination resort. And so these are user stories for that resort that we'll be working with. All right, first one. As a couple, we want separate activities for couples and teenagers so that we can all enjoy our vacation. Anybody ever gone on vacation with a teenager? Anybody? Just me? So it turns out this is actually pretty important. And so if we look at this story, there is a conjunction, a connector word in it, and, right? And so whenever we find one of these conjunctions or connector words, we can pretty much always break the story right there and have two separate stories, right? Whatever was on either side of the conjunction. So in this case, we would have, as a teenager, I want activities to do with other teens, and presumably without my parents, so that I won't be stuck with my boring parents the whole time. You're ruining my life, man. I can't believe you took me to this tropical resort. It's terrible. Oh, sorry, it was my outside voice. Uh, and then we might have, as a couple, we want romantic activities so that we can rekindle our love connection. Sounds like there should be like an 80s game show, right? The Love Connection. Welcome to the Love Connection. Maybe there was. I'm not sure, but I'm hearing game show music in my head. So that's the technique. And as simple as it is, some like kind of remarkable things happen when we practice it. So let's practice it. All right. So here's where we get to make a call. We could be two groups of three, or we could be one big group and work on it together. Some folks may prefer the like, oh, if we're a smaller group, I'll get to participate more. Some people may be like, oh, no, I like being in the big group. So we're just going to do a quick vote. Hands up, either virtual or physical. If you'd rather just stay in the big group and we'll all work on it together. Okay, that's 0. Hands up if you think you'll get more out of being in a smaller group and working on it. Okay, all right. So we are going to have two groups. And so I'm going to demo what we're going to do, and then I will send you off to do it. So let me bring my little demo over here.
I'm wondering, Chris, if you want to keep it in one big group, because then it's all recorded. I don't know if that's your preference, because I'm really happy either way.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
same,
I
same here.
think you were the deciding vote, so sure.
Okay, just thinking for the people who are going to watch the recording, it might make sense to them. So yeah, we're being nice to you guys watching.
Okay, happy to do it that way too. Um, all right. So in that case, let me share the link to our worksheet. So join me here. It's a worksheet, should not require any any login credentials or anything of that nature. Should just work. Interesting. There we go. Okay. And then let me give you a quick tour. of the worksheet. There we go. Uh, so there's 4 techniques we're going to learn. Each technique has a section in the worksheet. Each section has a link you can click on to get more information about that technique. Interesting. And I noticed it just jumped into paged format. I wonder if that was, did anyone open it up in like Microsoft?
No, sorry, that was actually me. I had a little pop-up saying that you might be missing headers, and I thought I don't want to miss anything, so I
Oh,
clicked on
interesting.
switch to pages. Sorry.
Oh, interesting. No worries. No worries. I've been wondering every once in a while that happens, and I've never known why that happens. Now I know.
Yeah,
Ah, interesting.
I'm the
And-
troublemaker.
No, that's you. Now I've learned something. So that's fantastic. Um, so, all right. So there is a link you can click on that will give you information about that particular technique. So if you're like, wait, how did Chris say we could do that? Click on the link. It'll explain it. And then there will be an example. And then there's the section practice this technique, which is where we're going to do our work. Now, all of the practice this technique sections have the same link to the same set of demo stories. And these are just stories about a tropical resort so that we have lots of material to work with. Um, and so for this technique, what we're going to do is somebody's going to find a story that appears to have a conjunction or connector in it. And we'll all say, yeah, that seems to have one. And we'll paste it in. And then we'll work with it. And since I'm here in the breakout room, I get to work with you. And we can do this one of 2 ways. If everybody's in the document, I could stop sharing. Or if you want, I could keep sharing, which I guess if people are watching a recording might be useful. Yeah, I see heads nodding. Okay, I'll keep sharing. So yeah, who wants to jump? Yeah, I would encourage you all jump into the example stories and find one that seems to have a conjunction or connector word in it. And when you find one, call it out, and I will copy it.
I've seen the as a scuba diver. Is
Okay.
that one all right?
As a scuba diver, I want guided and unguided dive trips and a dive shop with rental gear so I can enjoy my scuba hobby. Yeah, okay. So we'll work with that one. I will bring it in. I'll paste it in. All right, so step 1, call out the conjunctions or connectors.
You mentioned and before, so I'm going to pick all the ands.
Okay, and there's one more connector that I see. Turns out with. Yeah, with is a connector as well. And so theoretically, we should be able to write stories for each of the parts there. So let's start out with guided. So I'm just going to bring that in. I want guided dive trips. And so what I like to do is you know, I often like to encourage people to really focus on the value first. And so let's start there. What's the value to a guided dive trip? Who can think of some value that might be provided by a guided dive trip?
Safety.
Oh, okay. I like that. I like that. Just moving so I can see the chat. There we go. I want guided dive trips so that uh, I'll feel safe. Okay, so then we jump up to the top line. Who is the diver that wants the guided dive trip because it'll help them feel safe? What kind of diver?
A new diver, maybe?
Ah, as a novice diver, I want guided dive trips so that I'll feel safe. We like that? All right. Let's move on. Unguided dive trips. So I want unguided dive trips. Again, what's the value in an unguided dive trip?
Like more exploration.
So I can explore at my own pace. Okay. And just because formatting, there we go. So who's the diver? What kind of diver wants to explore at their own pace? And that's valuable to them.
Experienced one or someone with their qualifications.
As an experienced diver, I want unguided dive trips so that I can explore at my own pace. Love it. And then finally, dive shop. So actually, this one's interesting. Let's pull out rental gear first. Uh, so I want rental gear available. What's the value in having rental gear available?
I don't have to fly all my gear over from another country.
Okay. And who wants that?
Interstate or international traveler.
Ah, okay. I like that. I like that a lot. And one of the things that's interesting is we can sometimes find there's multiple use cases, right? One might be, oh, someone who's flying in, they don't want to travel with all their stuff. What's another one? Who else wants to rent gear? This would
Someone who
be,
doesn't have gear and doesn't know what they want may want to experiment with different gear.
oh, I love that, right? So maybe as someone who hasn't purchased gear yet, I want rental gear available so that I can go on a dive. And then I love this, Sheila. Maybe as someone contemplating the purchase of like new or upgraded gear, I want high-end demo rentals available so that I can try out the latest thing before renting it. And this is one of the things that I think is really powerful about story splitting is as we're breaking the stories down, it draws us into these conversations with our stakeholders where we're going to really get a lot deeper understanding of who they are, who are the different personas, what are their needs, right? Because as we're splitting things smaller, the level of detail is actually going up, right? And our level of understanding of the people we're building this for is going up as well. And then finally, okay, besides rental gear, why do we want a dive shop? What other value does having a dive shop at the resort give us?
Well, if they've got high-end gear available and somebody can test it by renting it, they may make some nice sales with a
Oh,
nice markup.
yeah. So that I can trial
Trial.
and buy new gear. All right, who's the person who wants to try out and ultimately buy some fancy new gear?
People looking to get more into diving or people looking to upgrade their old gear.
Yeah,
To upgrade.
someone looking to upgrade my kit, as they say. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you notice? What are your questions? What are your thoughts about splitting a story this way?
We've got four stories out of it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, the dive shop stories could be broken down further too. As you,
Yeah.
when you go back and talk to them, it may turn out to be 8 or 10 different stories because there may be stories around the actual accounting and purchasing and cash flow, cash management,
Yeah.
and whether you're going to take credit cards in the dive
Yeah.
shop.
Yeah.
Could really
So,
get big.
yeah. So one of the things that I'll encourage us to do is as we're getting into the other techniques, we absolutely can source stories to split from here, but it's also fun to look at the ones we've already split and pick ones that we can drill into even farther. And again, not every technique will apply to every story, but gosh, I bet we can find techniques that will apply, to any story that we have. Um, Questions before we move on to the next technique?
I'm just wondering when a story would get too small.
Oh, I love that
And
question.
some people I may or may not have worked with sort of go, well, these ones are so small, I'll just do them all at the same time. They're all mine.
Mhm. So I've never in all the years I've been doing this encountered a team where their ongoing problem was their stories were too small. Um, and I'll caveat that with I did encounter one team who said, yes, our stories are way too small. We're doing like well over 100 stories every week, and just the accounting of moving things around in the tool is an overhead. And what I found with them was that their stories weren't stories. They didn't have a stakeholder. They didn't have a value. They were using story as just a task list, right? They would have a story to write a class that, wraps this, right? That was a story. And yeah, it was taking them as much time to manage the ticket as it was to like write and test the code. But for teams where their stories really are stories, there's a stakeholder, there's a value. I've never found a team whose ongoing problem is the stories are too small. That tends to self-correct. Um, but there's a related question that honestly most groups don't kind of stumble upon until right towards the end of this whole thing, which is like, when should we break a story? Because a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, if we can break stories infinitely small, then, these techniques are actually dangerous, right? Because we could be like, hey, have you seen our product owner? We're like, I don't know. They went into their office yesterday to split a story. They haven't come out. And and so the real question is, when should we split a story? And for me, let me stop sharing so I can get fancy with my background for a second. For me, really, there are two big motivators for splitting a story. So one of them is that, just for where that item is in our product backlog, it's too big. And what I mean by that is a typical flow is, we get a request. Maybe it comes at a sprint review. Maybe it's just somebody reaches out to our product owner or whatever. And it's like, oh, we would want this. And so we bring that into a backlog refinement session. We talk about it just a little bit. We give it a great big estimate because it's a great big thing. We identify a few things to maybe do some research on, and boom, it goes into our product backlog, right? It's not super high priority, but yeah, eventually we think we'll get to that. So, maybe its estimate is like, I don't know, 277. And that's fine. The other things around it are like, or I guess it would be 233 because the other things around it would be like maybe 377, 144, things like that. So eventually this thing starts rising in priority, and a product owner would notice, oh, for where it is in our product backlog, it's too big, right? The other things at that level of priority have already been broken down smaller. And so we'll bring that into a backlog refinement session, get together with relevant stakeholders, break it into some smaller things, right? Maybe medium-sized things. So now these things maybe are like 55s, 21s, 34s, something like that. And then this process repeats multiple times until that original big request ends up as a whole bunch of teeny tiny sprint ready requests up at the top. So one motivator to break a story smaller is that, oh, it's rising in priority and it's kind of just time, right? For good backlog hygiene, it's time to get the next level of detail, the next level of understanding, and break it into some smaller things. The other motivator is that we might have a great big thing. Oh, we're not going to get to this for a while. But we see an opportunity to break out a teeny sliver of it, move that sliver up to the top and implement it right away, thus maybe providing some early value in that area to our stakeholders and giving us the opportunity to do some product discovery work to basically try to validate our belief that the big story is worth doing. An example of that is in those sample stories, there is a story about having a business center at our resort, right? It's something about like, I want, as a business person, I want the ability to do printing, copying, faxing, and internet access in a business center at the resort so I can get a little work done while I'm on vacation. And maybe we think, oh yeah, we should do that, right? That's important. Um, and building out a business center, that's a big investment, right? There's, we need a room, we need furniture, equipment, right? Computers. But we see an opportunity to implement something smaller, right? Some small piece of it early, like, the whole printing and copying and faxing. Do people fax anymore? I'm not sure. But like we could get one of those multifunction devices, right? Very cheaply and easily, put it at the front desk, maybe put flyers in people's rooms and say, hey, if you need to do any printing, copying, or even faxing, come to the front desk, we'll do it for free. So very easy to do, very low cost. And let's say we do that, and then in the next 3 to 6 months, nobody ever comes to the front desk wanting to do any printing, copying, or faxing. Should we still build a business center? Right? Maybe our belief that the people who come to our resort are interested in business center stuff isn't well founded, right? Because we gave them the ability to do some of that and nobody took advantage of it. So maybe a longer answer than you were looking for, but like that's the other reason to split a story is because, oh, we have an opportunity to deliver some of the value of a big thing early, and by doing so, test out, is it worth doing that big thing? Is that helpful? All right. Let's see here. So that's our first technique. So the next one, I call it generic words or generic terms. And with this technique, we're again finding ways to make progress just by looking at the words we use to capture our idea. So this time we're looking for things that are very broad, very general, very generic, and seeing, oh, are there more specific instances of that we could separate out and do as individual stories? So let's see this one in action. And we're going to keep drilling down into the example story here. So we're going to grab the part of it that said, as a couple, we want romantic activities so that we can rekindle our love connection. I love that, the love connection. So anyone see a very broad, very general, very generic word in there?
Romantic.
Yeah. Romantic and in specific, I think like, activities, romantic activities. So whenever we see that, generic term, the first thing we do is we ask the question, what kinds of romantic activities could there be? And we make a list. right? And maybe we come up with something like this, right? A romantic dinner, a couple's massage, etc. And then we see, can we write stories for those individual instances of the more general concept? So we might have, as a couple, we want a couple's massage so that we can relax and reconnect together. Or as a couple, we want to go on a romantic cruise at sunset so that we can enjoy romantic moments with no children around. Or perhaps as a couple, we want a romantic dinner so that we can enjoy quality time together and set the stage for an exciting evening. So that's the technique. Shall we practice it? All right, I'm going to flip back to our document. And so for this one, first thing we're doing is looking for a story that has a generic word. And we could use, where do we go? Maybe let's look through here and see if any of the smaller stories we created feel like they have a generic word in them. And if we don't have luck there, we'll go out to the other example stories. But what do you see in here that feels like, oh, I could think of a bunch of more specific examples of that thing?
And the last one, as someone looking to upgrade my kit,
Mhm.
kit is pretty generic.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's grab that. All right. So we're going to put it here. This is the story we're starting with. And so my kit is going to be our generic term. All right. So this is where we'll find out if there are people who are divers among us. What are some examples of things that might be my kit if I'm a diver?
Wetsuit.
Okay. Wetsuit. Ooh, spell check likes it as one word. What's another thing that might be part of my kit?
Oxygen tank,
Okay. Okay. So air tank.
air tank.
Yep. All right. How many people are divers? All right. I'll help you out here. Uh, so a dry bag, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's a bag I can put stuff in and it will stay dry. Because when you go diving, you're usually in places that are very wet. It's nice to have dry clothes when you're done. Um, uh, this is gonna be a tough word. See if I can spell it. Buoyancy. No, spell check's just slow. There we go. Buoyancy, control vest. So this is a vest divers wear that they can add air, remove air to help them get neutral buoyancy. Um, fins. By the way, if you ever go diving, they're fins. They're not flippers. Lots of dive people get like really specific about that. They're like, flipper was a dolphin. These are fins. Um, a good one is a dive computer. So there we go. All right. And so what do you think? Could we write stories about each of these?
Yeah,
What do
we
you?
could do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could. I absolutely think we could. Let's just pick one just for practice. So I want to uh oops, to trial and buy a new dive computer. So, what's the value in getting to trial and then ultimately buy a new dive computer? And again, if you're not sure, just say, I don't know, I'm not a diver. But it's kind of like any piece of tech.
I guess you'd know how much battery it has, so then how long it's going to last, or maybe the depths.
So that uh, I know I'll be happy with what I buy. Yeah, I like that, right? So if I can try it out, um, then I get to discover, yeah, does it have good battery life? Does it have the features I want? Does it have good usability? And so who is that person? Who's the person who wants to try out maybe multiple new dive computers before making a purchase?
When you say a dive computer, do you use that for snorkeling or do you just use that for scuba? I know nothing about diving.
So a dive computer is a little thing hooks up to your oxygen tank. It hangs kind of in front of you on a hose so you can check it regularly. And one of the big things it does is it lets you know how much longer you can safely stay down, both from a standpoint of how much air do you have left, but also the pressure you've been under. Because the deeper you go, the more pressure your body's under. Then as you come up, you have to do these like little safety stops to let your body readjust to the pressure. Otherwise, nitrogen bubbles form in your blood, and that's bad. And so a dive computer can, automatically kind of tell you this is how much time you have left and, let you know like at what rate you should come up and when you should take breaks and things like that. And also over the course of a day, if you're doing multiple dives, it does a real good job of telling you, given that you did a dive an hour ago, here's how much time you can spend under this time. And and I might offer as either as someone who's never owned a dive computer, or possibly as someone who's like was unhappy with my existing dive computer, right? I really want the chance to try out and ultimately buy a new one so that I know I'll be happy with it. Does that make sense? And again, notice, I love what just happened here, right? Here we have a team that's, this is maybe a story in our back team backlog. And as a team, we're like, wow, we don't have a lot of like subject matter knowledge about what our users do and why they do what they do, right? And this happens a lot in real life, right? My first like big corporate programming job, I was working at a company that did really high-end financial software. Our clients were the people who did research for and ultimately managed the portfolios for big mutual funds. And that was a world I didn't know anything about. I was a tech guy, right? I knew about code and things like that, but I didn't know like the way a mutual fund manager thinks. And so the act of splitting the stories, hopefully, doing it with knowledgeable stakeholders there with us, there's a lot of learning that happens, right? The team starts to really understand the context and the motivation and kind of the world of the users. So, questions about that technique? We feel good moving on to the next one? All right, again, switching back my visuals. All right, so the next technique uses acceptance criteria to help us split the story smaller. So I think of acceptance criteria as essential details, right? These details are so important that before we consider this story done, we're going to want a demonstration of each of these things to make sure that we're satisfied that these key details were in fact done the way we need them done. And if we're doing this really well, right, we've got tests that verify that each of our acceptance criteria are met. And hopefully those are automated tests, right, if we're doing software. So continuing to drill in, we had the story about the romantic dinner, right? So imagine at our tropical resort, we're thinking, oh, we should start offering romantic dinner packages. And so this is our story for, our romantic dinner package offering. And we'd say, okay, big picture, right? This is what we want, right? It's couples are our stakeholders. The deliverable is a romantic dinner package. And the value is they'll enjoy quality time together. So what are the acceptance criteria, right? We might talk about this and ultimately come up with a list that looks like candles and fresh flowers on the table, a variety of food options on the menu, good wine list, live music, but nothing too loud. And our wait staff is, dressed snazzy for the romantic dinner package offering. So that might be a pretty good set of acceptance criteria for that story. So now let's see how we can use this to split the story into smaller stories. Remember that, in the overview format, we've got this middle line that starts out, I want something. Well, it turns out an acceptance criteria is definitely something we want, right? We want it so much that we specified it. We're going to write tests to verify that we have it. And so the first thing we do when checking out if this acceptance criteria could potentially become its own story is we drop it in that middle line, right? I want whatever the acceptance criteria is. And then we ask ourselves, is there some value that gets created when that acceptance criteria is present? And if there is, okay, this is looking promising. Then we ask ourselves, is there a stakeholder, right? Somebody outside of the team who cares about that value and can give us meaningful feedback about what we created. And if there is, ooh, this is looking really good. And then the final thing we need to ask ourselves is, hey, could we implement this separate from the rest of the story? And if the answer is, yeah, actually we could, right? That could become its own story. The original story just got smaller. So let's see this one in action. So we're going to grab the first acceptance criteria. We want candles and fresh flowers on the table. And we ask ourselves, does that create value? We might say, yeah, right? It sets a romantic mood. And then we would say, well, okay, who cares about that value? And say, oh, well, the couple, right? They care about the romantic mood. And then finally, we ask, could we implement that separate from the rest of the dinner package, right? So could we possibly start offering romantic dinner packages, but we don't have candles, we don't have fresh flowers. And then in the next sprint, right? Maybe we make a deal with a local florist, we go out and we buy candles, and now we've added the incremental value of candles and fresh flowers on the table for our romantic dinner package offering. And I would say, yeah, right? We could do that, right? We could start offering our romantic dinner packages even before we have the flowers and the candles. And adding them will make our dinner packages even more valuable. All right, so let's try this one. And again, switching back to the worksheet. So for this one, I've kind of templatized it for you. So we're going to start out with this story. As a sunbather, I want lots of beach so that I can work on my tan. I want to go. I want to go to this place already. And we've got some acceptance criteria. So the beach can accommodate 100 sunbathers simultaneously. There is sunscreen available at the beach. There are lounge chairs and umbrellas. There is food and drink service at the beach. And only hotel guests have access to our sunbathing beach. And I've taken each one of those acceptance criteria and dropped it into the middle line of our who, what, and why template. And so our mission, should we choose to accept it, is going to be to figure out, does that create a value that we can describe? Is there a stakeholder outside the team who cares? So let's dive in. Having the beach accommodate 100 sunbathers simultaneously. Um, let's start with the who this time. Who's somebody who cares about the beach having lots of capacity?
The resort owner.
Okay, so resort owner, we could write it from their perspective. Let's have a shot at that. As a uh, resort owner, I want the beach to accommodate 100 sunbathers simultaneously. So what's the value that they get?
The beach doesn't feel crowded to their clients.
So that the beach uh, doesn't feel crowded. Nice. And then, as I will often do with teams, if they pick an internal stakeholder, right, like the resort owner is definitely an internal stakeholder. Sometimes, like that's the perfect stakeholder for the story, right? Because internal users of your system are perfectly valid and important users. But sometimes when we find the value, we actually realize, oh, yes, this internal stakeholder gets value, but they get value because there's some external stakeholder who's getting value. So in those cases, it can be good to circle back. Yes, the resort owner gets value if we have a lot of capacity at our beach. Um, but who's the person who more directly gets value when the beach doesn't feel crowded?
The actual resort, the people that stay on the resort themselves. Although my head's still in the romantic sort of story, and I'm thinking they probably wouldn't want 100 people on their beach. They might want something secluded. But no,
Oh,
it is the people.
let's go with it. So as a couple, I want a beach that I want the beach to, let's just say, be able to accommodate 100 sunbathers simultaneously, uh, even when there are far fewer, so that um, maybe the beach doesn't feel crowded and we can find a secluded spot. Oh, I like that. I like that. And we could workshop the description here, but I think the main thrust here is, oh, people are coming to our resort, they're going to want to like have space, right? They're not going to want to feel really crunched in, right? If we're going for a romantic experience at our resort, then cramming people in on the beach like sardines is probably not going to give them that experience. So, we could kind of workshop a little bit how we express that. But yeah, I love that. I love that. All right. Who is the stakeholder who wants sunscreen available at the beach? And feel free to either come off chat or come off mute or put it in the chat. What do you think? Who's someone who wants sunscreen to be available at the beach?
Probably parents, well, specifically parents, so that then they can sort of entice their kids to put sunscreen on.
Oh, as a parent, I want sunscreen available at the beach so that um, I can uh,
Reapply to my kids when they've been there too long.
reapply to my kids, uh, even if we run out or forget.
Perfect.
Right. So yeah, that's great. So I don't have to run back up to the room, right? And I'm here trying to manage like three kids running around at the beach, and it's like, oh, we forgot the sunscreen, right? And I don't feel like I want to just leave the kids here, but yeah, so I can just get it here at the beach. I love that. Um, who is it? Well, actually, let's do the value again. I love doing value. What's the value if there are lounge chairs and umbrellas at the beach?
Oh, it could be a concession that
Oh,
where you're getting revenue from it. And also, if you have people working at the beach, usually they can get tips for
mm.
providing lounge chairs and umbrellas.
Ah, I like it. So one way we could start out with the internal stakeholder of as a, let's just call it vendor for now. I want uh, to rent out lounge chairs and umbrellas at the beach so that I can make money. And then again, if we do this like circle back and say, okay, so this is kind of an internal, potentially internal user, right? Maybe we actually, as a resort, are uh,
Well, it's a third party to the resort if it's a
it,
vendor.
yeah, it could be, right? So it could be like, oh, we make these concession available to third parties. So, for us, the resort, it's a revenue opportunity. And then for the vendor, right, it's something that they can sell. So we could set like this could stand alone the way it is. If we wanted to circle back and say, okay, the vendor's going to be able to make money renting out lounge chairs and umbrellas because people want them. Why do people want them?
So they can hang out longer.
Ah, so that I can hang out at the beach longer. And who's the person who wants to hang out at the beach longer? And it'll be enabled if they have the lounge chair and umbrella.
Well, the guests definitely want to hang out longer. And
Yeah.
anybody that's got a concession wants them to hang out longer, so they'll take advantage of more concessions.
Yes, yes. And so as a guest, good. And what kind of guest in particular really wants the lounge chairs and umbrellas? And notice I'm like facilitating us to like drill in for like deeper understanding, right? When I'm facilitating a backlog refinement, I often do this. It's essentially the equivalent of five whys,
Well,
right?
it could be couples, it could be parents, it could be somebody who has a very nice swim outfit that they do not want to get wet or sandy.
Oh, I love it. So, yeah, like parents who are there because their kids are playing in the water and in the beach, or someone who's there to enjoy the atmosphere of the beach but doesn't want to. Yeah. So, as someone who uh, doesn't want to uh, get wet slash burned, right? And I guess lounge chairs are sandy. It's not so much about the wet, sandy or burned. I want to rent lounge. I want, and they just want the lounge chairs there, right? I want lounge chairs, umbrellas at the beach, and they're probably willing to pay for them so that I can hang out at the beach longer.
Oh,
Yeah.
wet goes in there too if you're talking about designer outfits that they really don't want to get wet because they don't
Oh,
even know if they're color fast.
oh, I love it. So I don't want to get sandy, wet, or burned. Love it. I love it. Um, all right. Are we feeling like we're getting the sense of this one? Are there questions or things you're wondering about this technique?
So when we break down the story by acceptance criteria, the story is usually, or sometimes it's actually the test. It's right, or because acceptance criteria can sometimes be the acceptance tests or convert them into tests. Now that we made the story smaller, that will be the actual test.
Yeah, so this is really cool. Um, I find that something that would be an appropriate test, like testing at the right level of detail for the bigger story, right? So, for example, um, say the sunscreen, right? If we just kept that as an acceptance criteria, and I was like, oh, I need to write a test for that, my test might be, oh, I can walk up to some stand or vendor thing that is on the beach, right, without leaving the beach, and purchase sunscreen. And if I can do that, okay, I would say I've demonstrated that sunscreen's available at the beach. When we split this out as its own separate story, one of the things that will let us know that it's really a story is that we can come up with acceptance criteria for that story. So real quick, let's see if we can come up with three. So if the story is there's sunscreen available at the beach, can we come up with at least three details that would be important before we would say, we've done a good job of making sunscreen available at the beach? What do we think?
Shouldn't these already be acceptance criteria versus breaking them down into acceptance criteria?
Well, so they started as acceptance criteria, right, on a bigger story. So they absolutely are acceptance criteria and for the original big story. But what we've determined is that, oh, this story about a sunbathing beach, that's too big. It's not sprint ready. We can't implement all aspects of the beach in one sprint. And so we're learning that some of these acceptance criteria could actually be split out and become their own separate stories. And one of the things that will let us know that what we've come up with really can stand alone and can be its own story is that we can create acceptance criteria for it. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Um, well, if you scroll back up to the acceptance criteria, um, shouldn't they be either anded or ored? As a developer, I wouldn't know by just looking at that how to code that. I mean, if it was codable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because there's no and, there's no or, so then I would have to go back to the product owner and I would have questions about that.
Yeah. And I would say, so if this is the acceptance criteria for this story, um,
I'm talking about the bullet points there because
right.
that
Yeah. So these are the acceptance criteria for that story. So essentially, you could think of them as there's an and connecting each one of them, right? Because it's like, this is the big picture. We want a beach. And, what do we need from a beach? It needs to accommodate 100 sunbathers, and there has to be sunscreen available, and there has to be lounge chairs available, and like these would all be connected by an implicit and saying that these things all must be true before we would be willing to accept the original story as complete.
now it looks like as you go below, you see, for instance, as a couple, as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So then I wonder who is the audience for these requirements, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah,
it says as a couple, as a parent,
yeah,
maybe. So it seems like it's well, I don't even know. I don't know how to answer that, right? Because when you're writing requirements, you got to write requirements for an audience. But
yeah.
this is like couple, parent, customer.
Yeah. So one of the things that
Your boss is going to say, I need requirements for somebody.
yeah, yeah. And one of the things that we're discovering here is that when a story's big, right, and we pick like, oh, who's the right persona to, represent the value of that big story, um, when we start to break it into smaller and smaller pieces, we often find that inside of the big group of people that are going to get value from the original story, right, who we chose to represent by whatever persona we thought best represented the big group, there are actually smaller groups of stakeholders who are more relevant to those smaller components inside the story, right? So, for example, um, the size of the beach and its capacity, right? That might be more of interest to people who want this feeling of space and not being crowded. And so picking a persona that really cares about that is appropriate to help us better understand like why is that an important part, right? And we might find as we dig into our beliefs about why we're doing it that either, yeah, there's a lot of couples and they do want their space, or who knows, we might dig in and find actually when we survey our couples, they actually think it's delightful to be near other couples, right? But they don't want to be near kids. And so we might actually discover that what we need isn't so much a great big beach, but we might need a part of the beach that is segmented for adults only, right? Because actually what matters to them is not having the kids running around and spoiling the mood. And so as we're diving in, and the stories are getting smaller because we're breaking the original big thing into smaller pieces, we're finding that that audience, as you put it, is getting smaller and more targeted, right? And so the people who care about, the capacity of the beach may be, distinct or at least better represented by a different persona than the people who care about, say, having sunscreen available. Does that make
But
sense?
if you're trying to prepare this for, let's say, a sprint review,
Mhm.
you have like a team,
Yep.
and if you have all, couple, parent, all these different things, you know, it sort of sounds like a lot of these personas are not going to be on the team,
Oh, right.
but you're
Yeah.
but you're trying to do a sprint review.
Hmm.
So, well, first, I'm not understanding that, and then second of all, I think that first one is a good example of my question. It says, I want the beach to be able to accommodate 100 sunbathers simultaneously. Well, if you already have a property, so that's implying that we can change the size of the property. And that may not be possible. I guess it depends on where you are in the process.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
could
Right.
also be that you're going to be tearing down whatever's on the property and building something else, so you can rearrange where the beach is.
Yeah. And it's one of these things where when our stakeholders ask us for things, depending on where we are in the process of building something, um, it may be more or less achievable. It may be more or less expensive to do, right? So, for example, this is the sort of thing that, yeah, we'd probably like to do enough product discovery work early to know that, yeah, we think having a big, spacious beach is going to be an important driver of value. So that, yeah, even when we're shopping for properties to build our resort, that might become an acceptance criteria for the purchase decision. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because if we only think of this after we've bought a property and it's a small property, right, we may find that, this isn't very achievable. And so then, right, we may have to go back and say, well, for this type of stakeholder, right, if these are important stakeholders for us, are there other ways we can give them this value, right? If this value is really important to them, because maybe having the beach just be really big, gosh, given the constraints that exist right now, it's not so much an option, right? And so we might get into like, oh, what if people have to reserve times at the beach and we have like a rotating schedule so that, you know, uh, people can get time at the beach, but still have, that sense of space and, not being overcrowded. So, the team really gets to look at like, given the constraints, how can we provide that value to those people?
But we may not even have, like, since you're writing these things for a sprint, right? So they're being written for the whatever the team is, the multifunctional team.
Hmm.
So these things may be written and it may not be possible because if you don't have somebody on the team that controls the size of the property, then
Yeah.
it can't be done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that could very much be a thing that a stakeholder comes to us and says, hey, we need you to make this. And we might have to come back to them and say, wow, given the constraints, including the capabilities of the people on the team, we can't do that right now, right? That is like out of our capability to do. Um, and this actually, let me zoom out and go a little bit bigger picture here, because this is good stuff. Um, Let me make me all big and important again. So this is one of the reasons that the strategy of like, oh, right before sprint planning, we're going to try to like spin up some stories for this sprint is actually a really bad plan, right? A much better approach is we're working with our stakeholders kind of on an ongoing basis, and we're trying to identify way in advance, like what are the big important things, um, and then doing progressive backlog refinement with stakeholders and the team so that, we get a big request nice and early, have time to workshop it. And then as that request is rising in priority, we're starting to chop it up into these smaller stories where we're adding more and more detail and, really exploring, hey, given where we are in our development, what options are, easy, right? They would get low estimates. What options are really hard? They would get, big estimates. And what things might be so hard as to be almost impossible at this point in the journey. And so having that ongoing and that refinement really, I find, happens primarily in two different places. The real deep dives, most teams do say a regular weekly backlog refinement session where the product owner will pick some specific items to refine, invite some key stakeholders that are relevant to those items so we can really get into the details with the team about those items. And at sprint review, this is where I think of it as like the town hall meeting. This is where we want to invite as wide a stakeholder community as possible so that, yeah, we're looking at the stuff that got done this sprint, but we're also looking at upcoming stuff and really kind of tapping into the stakeholders and saying, hey, does this seem to be the right stuff? What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? What are your new requests? How is the market changing? How are your needs changing? So that not only do we have this like short-term visibility into like, oh, what's going to come up in the next sprint or two, but we have this opportunity to have longer-term visibility and conversations with our stakeholders about, hey, by the way, we think that having a sense of spaciousness at our beach is going to be important, so that as early as possible, we can be factoring that in. So I love that, right? And it's true, all too often I see teams that treat that backlog refinement as almost like something that somebody else does, maybe just the product owner, like right before a sprint, and they walk into sprint planning with like, hey team, here are the stories. And it doesn't work so well. I love this stuff, Dave. This is good stuff. Is this helpful?
One of the things that I came up with, I mean, it sort of comes from waterfall, where you had sort of a sprint zero where you have requirements people just writing requirements in the first stage.
Hmm?
And I had this idea where you maybe have sprints, a couple of sprints in the beginning where you have just teams of product owners and they're sprinting like what we're talking about right now so that they have the time before the developers to get enough stuff down or at least a roadmap basically because it's just like you said like you can't just have one sprint and then you have enough for the developers to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
although I've never seen it done in practice, but it was an idea I came up with that basically comes out of waterfall. But otherwise, like I mean, sprint zero, so you're going to have one sprint to make up enough work. That doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree. And there's
But
this whole, oh, go ahead.
a lot of times you're not going to give it to the developers until you've gone through a product strategy and feasibility analysis and looked at different options. So it's going to be a lot more fleshed out than what we're talking about here. And you're going to have involved all of the impacted departments and possibly external suppliers.
Yeah. And so the stuff we're talking about here is broadly called product discovery. And I dropped a link into the chat with lots of information about product discovery. And one of the inherent differences, I think, between, say, the traditional waterfall approach and, something like Scrum, some more iterative, more agile approach, is this, like, can we know enough at the beginning that all we really need to focus on is execution? And if the answer is yes, like if we can really understand what's needed and design it like really, really well And the only relevant thing we need to focus on now is implementing that thing that we designed. Then waterfall is a great approach for that. And there's actually a lot of types of work where it's a really good fit and it works really well. Where something like Scrum or Kanban or other agile approaches shine is environments where we actually can't know everything up front, right? There's going to be important discovery that's going to happen while we're building the thing. And sometimes the discovery is internal, right? Like as we're building it, we're discovering what's possible and what's easy and what's hard. And so that starts to shape what we're going to do. And then there's external discovery that happens, right? Our stakeholders are having new ideas about what they need, right? The market's changing, right? There's new technologies, right? Suddenly we need to have AI in our product, right? And um, and so in those cases where we know there's going to be a lot of change, the target is going to be constantly moving. And so something more iterative makes more sense. And that's where this idea of progressive elaboration about our understanding of the requirements is important. It's like, yeah, the stuff we're going to be implementing really soon. Oh, we really want to have all the details worked out so the team can really focus on building it. But we also want to build in this understanding that sometimes we're going to build something, show it in sprint review, and even though the stakeholders were like, yep, that's exactly what we need, when they see it, they're going to realize, oh, actually, we need something a little different. Or they might see it and realize, oh, actually, we need something totally different. Or sometimes it's like, that was what we needed, but now the market's changed and we need something different. And so it's like, okay, great. Let's talk about what you need that's different. And we're going to change our plans. And so these things like story splitting and all this are valuable in that kind of environment because it doesn't make sense to refine the whole product backlog into these really teeny tiny deliverables in that case, because, well, if everything's going to change, then making the things down here really small and well defined, it's kind of a waste of time, right? Because a lot of the stuff we're actually never going to do. And then even if we do it, by the time it gets to the top, the world has changed. And so our understanding of the details of those things has changed as well. And so this more progressive elaboration makes sense in an environment where there's a lot of change. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Um, One of the things that's very difficult is bringing too many people into discovery because uh, you'll have too many people. They all have different ideas. They'll even start arguing with each other in these meetings, or maybe somebody goes on vacation and they missed a meeting or two, and then they come back and say, "No, I don't want to do it that way. I
Yeah.
need to do it this way." And so, what happens is you cause all kinds of delays. The developers get confused. The developers get frustrated. Um, these are issues. So it's
Yeah.
kind of important to get one belly button sort of in charge of the whole thing, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be more people in there, but there has to be one person that makes the decision.
I totally
Just
agree.
just like there's one product owner, there sort of has to be one customer.
Yeah. Yeah. There has to be somebody who is ultimately the decider, right? And then to the extent that we're working closely with that bigger cloud of stakeholders, so that we can better understand their needs, we do well. But yeah, having that one person who at the end of the day gets to say, and this is what we're going to focus on and do is really important.
It doesn't
Um,
always work that way, though, because sometimes you have one sponsor who has the purse strings. And since they're paying for it, they get the final vote. But
it happens.
sometimes it's funded by multiple groups and you have multiple sponsors. And then you have to have a way to break the deadlocks that are bound to occur and just basically tell them, if you didn't show up, you voted for what we decided. So
Yep.
show up or send a representative or live with it
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stick with
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. And again, I think at the end of the day, right, having someone who is ultimately the responsible party works really well because
Yeah, and
That-
I've seen people get pretty pissed off at the team because it didn't come out the way either they thought it was supposed to come out, even though you had these weekly meetings, or they were pissed off because they didn't personally like it, but
Mhm.
maybe they weren't even going to the meetings. And then, they just popped
Yep.
up and saw it. This is a real problem. I've seen this go on many, many times, and anybody that's even reasonably objective can look at it and say, "Listen, you didn't even go to half of those meetings, or you just sort of showed up, and now you don't like this, and
Mhm.
now you're putting it on my team, basically." And
Was
Yeah.
somebody taking minutes? Were they getting any kind of approvals in the meetings that they had? So
uh,
if you're taking,
probably, yeah. I mean, so that can happen, right? But it's just like you said, the customer or somebody, the sponsor, or somebody's paying for it, right? What are you going to do? You're going to say, well, this is what was in the minutes. I don't think they're going to like to hear that,
well, the minutes
right?
would include attendance.
Yeah.
So
I
Yeah.
mean,
to be able to go back and say, you didn't bother to go to the meetings and you're not paying for it. And
yeah,
let me talk to your boss about this and see what they say. And
I,
usually they come around about then.
Yeah. I have and I want to be mindful of time because
yeah,
I think we're there.
okay.
But a quick real world story of this happening to my very first Scrum team, which was like late 1999, early 2000s, very first team I'm on. We are building a product that was going to serve the investment banking space for this financial software company that I was at. And we had identified a key stakeholder group for us was the salespeople for our investment banking products. Like we were like, these people know the investment bankers, know what they need, know what they want. We need to work with them. And so at the end of every sprint, we'd invite them to sprint review, and we'd send them a link to where they could like get the latest version of the thing and play with it and give us feedback, right? It wasn't released publicly yet. And none of them ever came to sprint review. Some of them, though, would reply to those emails, right, where we sent out the link to the latest version, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's great to see you guys making such awesome progress," right? And so we felt like, okay, we're doing good, we're doing good. And so we got to the point where we're like, all right, we're ready for our first, release of this thing, right? And so we announced internally, oh, we're getting ready for our first release, and here's the alpha that you can, download and start to work with. And then all of a sudden, that next sprint review, all of the investment banking salespeople were there and they were mad. They were like, "What is this? We can't sell this. This isn't what people need." Right? And they were really angry. And they were full of what was wrong with it. And the team felt really bad and we were really angry too because we were like, we were trying so hard, right, to get you involved. And luckily our product owner, this guy named Brad, did this really brilliant thing. I look back on it and I'm like, I don't know how he had the composure to do this. But he says, "Wow, I guess we really messed up, huh?" They're like, "Oh, you certainly did," right? And he's like, "You know what? I don't think we can go this alone. I think we're going to need you guys to like really look out, and check what we're doing because clearly on our own we're going to get it wrong." And they're like, "You betcha, we're going to be riding herd on you from now on." And Brad was like, "Well, I guess it's what we need." It was brilliant, right? At the time, I was like, "What's going on here?" Right? But it was like they were at every sprint review after that, and we canceled that first release. But every release after so we had to regroup and do some different things. But that next release, the one that actually happened, was a huge hit, right? Like big uptake on the part of our customers, and everyone after that just better and better success. The product was incredibly successful all these years later. And I mean, we're talking 26 years later. That product is still a cornerstone of that company's offering. I mean, I'm sure none of our original code is still in it, but so yeah, you're absolutely right. That stuff happens. And I think that's where a really gifted product owner can use that very frustrating moment to get engagement that, we were lacking, right? We
that
needed
could
that
have
engagement.
really
They
that
weren't
could have
engaged.
really gone south.
Yeah. Oh, it was in the
I
process of going very south.
I would have never done that because you could get an internal manager that fires you on the spot for something like that.
It could have gone that way. It really could have. So it was a gutsy move. And it worked out brilliantly though, because we had the feedback we needed from that moment on. So I think we're out of time. I want to share, I dropped a couple of links, 3 links in the chat. I want to just real quick share with you. All of the information from today's topic is available at smallerstories.com. So if you go to smallerstories.com, all of the techniques are there, examples, everything you need to practice this stuff. And I do recommend practice it. Like anything else, the more you practice, the better you get. And my recommendation is at first, practice with stories that aren't your real stories. And the reason I recommend that to do that at first is you won't get distracted by all the fussy details of your real stories, and you'll get to practice the technique, build some muscle memory with the technique. And then after you've done the technique a handful of times, you're like, oh, I see how this works. Yeah, go grab your real stories, and I guarantee you're going to be able to make great progress. I dropped a link in the chat to like all the different events I've got coming up. I hold free online open office hours, usually a couple of times a month through Meetup, so you'll find them in there. And I appear at various conferences and things like that. I also do some public workshops, and the final link in here is a link where for my public workshops, people who are job seeking can get like a pretty deep discount from that page. It's the special page for people who are job seeking. So if that's of interest, that's awesome. Check it out. Otherwise, thank you
Where's
so much.
where did you say that is?
Oh, it's in the chat, in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, he
Oh,
put it in the chat.
is this your company?
Agile Learning Labs is, yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any do you guys have any openings?
Alas, we do not right now.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
But actually, I do, hold on a regular basis. So let me grab it real quick.
I'm a scrum master and a agile coach as well.
Link in the chat to my LinkedIn profile. Reach out and connect, because one of the things that I do on a somewhat regular basis is I see plenty of openings that, flow through my feed because I'm connected with, lots of companies that I've worked with and people I've worked with in the past. And I tend to repost the ones that look really good. So for example, I just reposted earlier today a really amazing thing that Jim Shore is doing, where he's building up a development team. That particular team, he's looking for people in Canada and Latin America. But what an amazing opportunity to work with Jim. But yeah, so I repost job offerings quite frequently. So follow me on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. I'm happy to accept.
Yeah, I just sent a connection request. I tried to put a note in there, but it seemed to disregard it. Maybe I pushed the wrong button, but
Yeah, I think
um,
sometimes
it's
LinkedIn you have to have like premium features to add notes.
oh,
They allow for a limited number of notes. I've experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
But I just want to be
this is the first time this happened to me.
Uh,
yeah, I don't know what they keep changing the platform. But yeah, I know we're over time here. Maybe this is something actually I've been thinking about. Maybe in the future we could have like a networking event for the meetup. I'm sure other meetups have had similar events that connect people who are hiring with people who are seeking opportunities. I think that would be great thing to do in the especially depending on the local area because the meetups are remote, but for the local participants, they can join and meet up in person or even virtual. But I want to thank you, Chris, for your time and insights. I think this was very
yeah.
valuable. It's been a long time coming. I've been trying to coordinate this for a while. So appreciate your time and sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right. And thank you for putting the links for my encourage everyone to visit the smallstories.com that we to go over some of the things that we covered today, and then reach out to Chris if you have any other questions or you want to discuss this further.
Yeah, it was awesome to hang out with you all, and hope I'll cross paths with you again in the future.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank
I
you.
just
Bye-bye.
sent you I was able to send a note